All right, good morning, ST 120. This is your week 7, unit 7 discussion. So this is it. You guys have made it this far. I'm really proud of you. I'm really glad I got to um, be a part of this with you guys. You've done a great job, and I really look forward to see what you guys end up doing next. So this week is inventory control and storage management. So we'll talk a lot about how important it is for, having proper storage and keeping, part of that record keeping again. Let me move my base over here. So objectives here for Unit 7. We're going to prepare surgical equipment and supplies for sterilization, storage, and distribution according to industry standards. We're going to demonstrate principles of aseptic technique and sterile technique, like always, identifying proper equipments and sterile supplies and where they go, and applying medical term and basic anatomy as always. So here are your assignments for Unit 7 for this week. You have a couple chapters you're going to need to read and do for your workbook, 16, 18, 19, 20, and 21. They're not super long, but they do have a lot of important information in them. So your first discussion post, again, is due Wednesday. And then your second post is due by Sunday with responding to 2 peers. Some of you have only been responding to 1, and I have to dock a few points for that. Make sure you're responding to 2 for full credit. All right. This is your last full week to get your assignments in. So I went ahead and put Unit 8's assignments on here as well, because you only have until Tuesday to get this last final reflection discussion post in. So once this deadline has been met, there's no making this one up, okay? So make sure that you read each of these instructions, these writing prompts, okay? And make it detailed. That way you get full credit. So these are due Tuesday by 11:59 a.m. Central Time, okay? So watch that deadline. That one's going to come up quick. It's not like a normal week. All right, so here's our Unit 7 discussion. Inventory control and management, again. Storage management, sorry, my face is in the way. So now that the trays have been decontaminated, we've disinfected, reprocessed, we've wrapped things and sterilized. Now what happens? Now where does it go? So now that everything has been gone through that whole process, you have to make sure that things are properly stored to keep them sterile. That's super important, to keep things sterile so then they can actually be used. You did all that work so they can be used, right? So there's a lot of important things, little like what seems like minute details that go into storage that are super important to keep them sterile, okay? So here are some of these sterile storage considerations. One, there's something called barrier packaging. That's a package that protects that sterile item from contamination, but it's not necessarily impenetrable, but it's going to protect that outer wrapper from maybe getting poked or torn or something like that. Location is important. So the place in which we store sterile supplies needs to be away from main traffic areas. That's going to prevent accidental contamination or, running into something and possibly, tearing it. Sterile items only, so you keep clean and dirty separate. You'll hear that a lot. The sterile items cannot be stored anywhere near non-sterile items. So it's a whole separate section, right? And usually you keep your sterile items near that sterilization cooling area as it came off maybe the steam sterilizer where it cools down. That way you don't have to transport it long distances. It's all right there, okay? You want adequate space in your storage area. You don't want things like completely cramped up against each other. It's going to, likely cause maybe something to get torn as it's being taken out. It doesn't allow for easy cleaning. You don't want like dust and stuff to settle, so you want to be able to clean those spaces. So that's an important consideration. Storage conditions especially. So these are things that have to be monitored, like the air exchanges, etc. You don't want any exposure to water, so you don't want things like main water pipes overhead of your sterile supplies. It's just a recipe for disaster. You don't want, the only exception to that rule is going to be the fire sprinkler heads. Those have to be there by code, but you don't want to store it near, like washers or anything like that. You have to have a minimum of 4 air exchanges per hour to, it sucks out the air in the room and replaces it with clean air. So if there is some buildup of something harmful, it gets rid of that. The temperature in the sterile area is typically between 65 and 75. 75 is, in my opinion, probably the highest you'll go. So it's going to be probably somewhere in the middle, most likely. It may not be quite as cold as the OR, but it is still pretty warm because anything warmer is going to promote bacterial growth, and you don't want that, right? And same with humidity. It has to be less than 70% because if it starts to get above 70%, it is like prime conditions for bacterial growth. They like heat and humidity, so we want to eliminate that potential for those bacteria to grow. I think there might even be like a minimum humidity. I think in the OR it's roughly 30%. If you go too low on the humidity and you don't have enough water in the air, it can also like promote static electricity, which could lead to a fire. So you also don't want it to be like 10 or 20% humidity. That's a little bit too low. You also want to have adequate lighting. If it's like you've got these dim, dark corners in your sterile supply area, you're not going to be able to read those labels very well. It might, you're also actually not going to be able to see if something is dirty or contaminated, maybe even has a small hole. So you want to be able to see what you're looking at, obviously. Okay, then we have this something called event-related sterility. You'll hear this term a lot in the field. So this is a concept where, something like this picture here, you've wrapped it, it's gone through the sterilizer. It will stay sterile unless something happens to cause it to become unsterile. So that could be maybe improper storage. It could be the condition of the package wasn't right. Products can degrade over time. Like if you've wrapped something that maybe expires, then we can kind of say that it's no longer sterile. The expiration date of the package, the integrity is lost. So maybe even what you're wrapping it in, the integrity can degrade over time. Like it can become brittle or break down over many years. So then it would no longer be sterile. Improper storage conditioning, like I said, could be maybe it got stored in a sterile supply room that was maybe 80 or 90% humidity. I've heard stories of facilities where maybe something was broken as far as their humidity control, and things went up to like 90% humidity, and even like sweat was running down the walls. I've heard of stories like this. So they had to reprocess literally everything because it can no longer be considered sterile because those conditions were no longer met. So it's very particular that you have to meet those standards. Improper handling, that kind of goes back to how do we store these properly? If they're being tossed around a lot, or if they're being laid on a shelf that's got maybe sharp edges, it's not smooth, it could cause those pinhole tears or whatever in the wrapper. So make sure you're handling these properly. So some basic storage guidelines. We've kind of talked about some of these already, but you want your storage areas to be clean, dry, and easily accessible. That's just kind of common sense. It has to be cleaned a specific way on a regular basis. You don't want dirt or dust to build up on these packages. You don't want to crush or bend packages. Some, like let's say you've got your peel packs of scissors or whatever, you don't want those to like get crumpled up. That could cause little tiny pinhole tears along that crushed edge that you may not even see. So make sure that they're laying like flat. You don't want to accidentally bend anything. Like I said before, items have to be placed 18 inches below sprinkler heads. That gives that sprinkler enough room to work if it does go off. Now, if it does go off, then things are going to get wet and they'll have to be reprocessed. But this is more to allow like a fire code thing. Again, don't store items near water. That's important. Check your package integrity when placing items. So you may not be the same person that put that same item through this, reprocessed, packaged it up, put it in the steam sterilizer, and brought it out. You may not be that same person. So whoever's putting that item back on the shelf where it needs to go, always check the package integrity before placing it. You don't want to put something back that really isn't even good to use. So check the outside chemical indicators. Just give a quick look, quick glance to the outside package. Make sure there are no holes. Nothing looks awry, okay? And always place heavy items on the middle shelf and lighter items on top. That is just for good body mechanics so you don't hurt your back. So it's easiest to grab something from the middle shelf instead of something really heavy, like grabbing it from the top of your head and down. You're more likely to injure yourself or drop it, so the lighter items will go on top. And again, keep clean and dirty separate. Your clean, sterile items are in a completely separate room from your decontam area. There is should be an actual visible wall between the two. And never pass through. Never bring, oh, I just got to run through real quick with my dirty case cart. You can't do that. You have to go a different way. So transporting sterile items can be done in a lot of ways. So put up a couple pictures here. There's a lot of types of case carts. Some are enclosed. This one is open with bins. It just depends on what your facility uses. Your transporting may even include like elevators. You have to put your case cart on an elevator and maybe send it down to a central decontam area. Sometimes they're on the same floor. It depends on your facility. I included this as actually a little video. So I was at Ohio State Medical Center a couple weeks ago now, and I got to tour their entire OR. Their decontam area was super cool because it's way bigger than anything I'm used to seeing in my smaller area. So their decontam area includes robots. So they have these little robot carts that are programmed like a GPS coordinate program that picks up their dirty case cart from the OR, puts it on an elevator, and then takes it down to their decontam. So I'll play this little video. So, honestly, it was mind blowing. I didn't know something like this existed. It's pre-programmed right there on that little computer, and it just goes. So this eliminates a lot of, wasted time because well, for one, they have like 8 ORs and they're huge. So it eliminates a lot of wasted time and going from, place to place with workers who need to be doing other things. So I thought that was pretty cool. You might see something like that if you're in a bigger place. Okay. So as far as record keeping goes, there are a lot of ways to manage inventory. If you're in a small podunk hospital, you might be stuck with pen and paper. We have some facilities that my clinical students go to that are old school and still use pen and paper. And then we have some of our bigger clinical sites like Ohio State Medical, who everything is streamlined, right? It's computerized, it's digital, it's tracked, everything has a place. It's actually really cool. So it's a huge undertaking no matter the size of your facility. Keeping track of literally everything that is used throughout the hospital for sterile items is a lot of work, and it has to be done properly or it won't work, right? So there are two terms here that refer to inventory management. You have operational supplies and then patient care supplies. So two different things that have to be kept track of in sterile processing. So the operational supplies are things that the CS department actually needs to function. That's going to include things like your detergent, your chemical indicators, wrappers, things that have to be had within that department for everything else to work. So those are operational. Now, patient care supplies is a little more self-explanatory. Those are things that they are going to be reprocessing or holding inventory that are used on patient care. So all of your disposables, you know, your case, things that come up on your case card. Now, there's also a term inventory here. That's what's in the department. So you have reusable inventory and then consumable inventory. So reusable can be reprocessed or it could be the actual larger items that are capital equipment, such as your washers and sterilizers. Those things cost a lot of money, so they are considered capital equipment. Now, your consumables are things that can be consumed or disposed of. Your disposable items, detergents, even though it's operational, can be disposed of, it's used. And then your wraps. So things like that that are usually not reprocessable are considered consumable inventory. Have to be reordered. Okay, so here's just a short little video of how this particular hospital manages their inventory. So you'll see, I want you to look at what he's talking about, but also just look around at the department and see how they're storing their items, okay? Do you see anything wrong maybe with how they're storing their items from what you've learned? Right off the bat, I can see one right here that I don't love. You're not really supposed to stack, those blue wrapped items, because if they, wear against each other, it could cause some friction or some tiny tearing. But overall, he does a good job explaining, how they keep track of their inventory. So this one's not super long, so just pay attention to those types of things.
Tracking stations, everything that comes out and then comes into the department has to be tracked via barcode. Now would be a good time for us to talk about stuff like inventory. Inventory is everything you own, and you own everything around here. This is your stuff, okay? Things like sterilizers are your assets. You have purchased them, okay, and they cost a lot of money. Anything that costs a lot of money comes out of your capital budget or makes up capital inventory, okay? All other things are, well, unless it's real hardware, are non-reusable inventory, and the name escapes me right now, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so we have things that we use over and over again, and things that are, here it is, consumable. Okay, that's a different type of inventory. We have to watch our consumables. We have to buy them in bulk because we use a lot of it, but not too much, so it goes bad. Okay, our inventory is tracked by multiple methods. In this particular case, this is a barcode reader. Okay, another way to track our inventory would be to utilize radio frequency devices, comparable to the stuff that they use in the store to prevent theft. So when the doorbell rings, if you walked out, they forgot to not scan something out on the way at the cashiers, this radio frequency indicator would set off an alarm outside. Well, radio frequency indicators are oftentimes used in hospitals too to provide us with real-time movement of the package. You tell us where it is at what given time. Okay? So that's what we have here. In this particular case, this is barcode. Everything that's supposed to be in the package is indicated on the computer screen. It tells us what's going out, what's coming back in, what's inside the package. All right? Moving further on down, we can see various computer screens that indicate our orders. Now, we have case cards that are being prepared. Right now, we don't have any case cards because they more than likely went out to the operating room. We have a case card here? All right, very good. So we have some case cards. Case card is one of the methods of inventory management and control. We have case cards. We prepare case cards a day in advance. We know who the doctor is going to see, what they're going to operate. We know what they're going to use. We're going to load it up in the cart, and it's going to go up to the operating room. If there are stat orders or immediate orders, they're going to be displayed. We're going to rush them upstairs, also on the cart, not by hand. Okay, and that's how it's going to be. There are other methods of inventory replenishment in different places. Automatic inventory replenishment, and that's basically, if we have, what would be the best way? Like in Stop and Shop, every time you scan out a product, it goes against the inventory tracking system that you have in the store, and when it reaches a certain order, automatically it's generated. Okay. Or we can have a exchange card system where we have identical card here and we have an identical card someplace else. And we simply on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, however we do it, we replace the card, one with the other. When we bring it downstairs over here, we restock it. Okay? So that's basically, some of the ways we handle our inventory right over here. All right? Well, I think that's basically it for our trip. The only thing that we didn't talk about, really, would be stuff like endoscopes. All right, we don't have access to endoscopes right now. For that, we have to go to the operating room. But you know what? If we make one more trip down that way, I want to show you something really quick, and then we'll be done.
So hopefully that was helpful to you to see their department and how, they use their inventory system. So it's good to get a feel of all these different departments and how they run, because not all facilities are going to be the same. You're going to see different things in different places. Okay, let me move on here. So I wanted to show you one more video on locating inventory. So you've put these items back. They have to go back in a certain place according to your department. And then how do you find those items and pick those items for a surgical case? So picking a surgical case cart is another really big part of your job. That may be your job for the day instead of being a decontam. Maybe your facility rotates those types of positions. So, or if you're in a very small facility, you might have to do it all. I've seen a lot of places like that. You work in decontam, you reprocess, repackage, sterilize, and put everything back if you're in a small facility. So it's important to know every step of the way. I would also recommend, if you're into it, there is this YouTube channel called Surgical Tech Tips. Even if you don't plan on going on to surgical tech, he does talk about other sterile processing items and instrumentation, etc. It's a really good channel. I like to use some of his videos for my own other classes that I teach, because he's kind of funny and he does a really good job at explaining things. So we'll watch how he picks a case cart. So notice right off the bat, their case carts are already different than the last one. They're open instead of closed.
The preference card. This is what we're going to be talking about today. Picking a case cart and talking about preference cards. Let's do this. Welcome back to another Surgical Tech Tips. Today we are going to be picking a case cart in the sterile supply room. I want to go do a little brief overview again of the preference card itself. We'll do a little walkthrough through the sterile supply room, and we're going to be picking a case card as well. A couple things to note, that is, your hospital, there might be people there that actually pick the case cards for you. If you do have that, awesome. That helps a lot and saves a lot of time. But if you don't, usually either you have to go in the morning and print out your preference cards for your cases for the day and pick your own case cards, in which case this video is for you. Or two, all those preference cards are printed out the night before, and you'll just come into the sterile supply room, find your preference cards, get your case cards ready, and get through your day. So let's get through this. Let's pick a cart. All right, so first thing I want to go over, just a brief little overview over the preference card itself. Up top on the preference card, you're going to have patient name, the surgeon doing the surgery, and the surgery itself. Moving down, you have gloves. These are all open supplies in this section, and these are all hold supplies in this section. Obviously, open supplies, you're opening everything in this section. Hold supplies, you're usually waiting until the surgeon comes into the room to ask him if he needs any of these, and it just depends on whether or not they may need them. Irrigations or solutions they might like to use. Second page, we've got the instrument set that we're going to be using for the case, the suture that we're going to be using for the case, and the dressings that we're going to be using for the case. All of these separate little boxes here are kind of places where you can put notes on the preference card, positioning notes for the nurse, what type of medication they may like to use for like a local anesthetic, how they may like to prep the patient, and any equipment that they might need in the OR, and settings for that equipment as well in any of these boxes. And then just general comments as well. A lot of surgical techs will put extra comments in the comments section as well as to maybe how they like to drape and stuff like that. All right, we are ready. We have our preference card, we have our case cart, and we're ready to pick this case. I did choose a very simple case to make this a little quicker and a little easier. So this is just an excision of a lipoma. So it's really not too in-depth as far as sterile supplies go, but you'll get the basic idea. So to start picking this case, we are basically just going to go right down this list and pick everything in order. The first thing that we have to pick, if you remember from looking at the preference card before, is gloves. So there's two 7 biogels for this surgeon that I'm just going to place right there in those hold bins, and I'm going to get gloves for myself too. I like to wear the 7.5 biogels during the case, but I'll also set up with the 7.5 non-latex. Always set up with a non-latex glove. Let's move on. Next on down the list, we have two items that the nurse is going to use during this case, and that is the ChloraPrep, which is the prep solution for the patient, and the Bovipad that they will be putting on that thigh. So let's grab a ChloraPrep and our Bovipad, and I'll just place that right on top of my cart because it's a little easier to get to. Now it looks like the last open general supply that needs to be opened before we move on into drapes is just going to be this 10cc syringe. Pretty much used across the board for injecting local. Okay, now we've got a couple drapes to pick. We've got some 3/4 sheets, a couple packs of towels, and it looks like a basin and a pediatric minor drape. So, I know the 3/4 sheets are right here. I'll just put those right underneath. Couple packs of towels. I'll just place them on the top there. And your pediatric minor drape. That is going to be in the next aisle over. Let's go over there. There it is. Nailed it. Now you're probably wondering right now, why isn't there any gowns? Why isn't there a Bovi on there? There's no suction tubing. There's no suction tip. Where is all that stuff coming from? And it's actually coming from this double basin on the preference card. This double basin on the preference card is this is like a giant custom pack. Well, not a giant custom pack. This is our like general minor custom pack. It comes with plastic basins in it, comes with its own Bovi and tip, comes with suction tubing, suction tip. It's got blades already in it, 2 10 blades and a 15 blade. It's got towels, it's got gowns, it's got all that stuff all packed in to this little package here with a table drape all included. Makes it much, much easier. There's one last supply for open. I forgot about it. And it's your hypo. You need that to go with your control syringe. I'm going to grab that. It was right here the whole time. Now I want to take a second to talk about that because I went over to where the needles actually used to be. Our hypos used to be down there, but they did change this a few weeks ago or like a couple months ago, and I'm still not used to it, obviously, because I went back to the same place it was. If you're ever in doubt, and I hope that your hospital is this organized, but if you see this column over here to the left of our items, that column, it looks like a bunch of random letters and numbers, but actually when you do a close-up to all of these different sections in our sterile supply room have those numbers. So if you're ever wondering where a certain item is, you just look at that item location and then look at all the labels on the walls and on the carts themselves, and you'll be able to easily find them. Now, instead of picking the rest of these hold supplies and moving this cart around the whole sterile supply room, as you can see, some of these little halls are pretty narrow, like narrow enough to only fit one cart at a time. So I'm just going to run through here really quick and pick the rest of these hold supplies and toss them in the cart. I'll be right back. that's it for hold items. All right, so that's it for picking sterile supplies in the supply room. All of my open items I put in my open box, as well as I have a couple of the bigger items on top of the cart right here. If you have more open items, you can use, a second drawer. All the hold items are down here in the hold box, and I've got some drapes over here underneath these open boxes. Let's go grab that instrument tray.
I'm gonna go ahead and pause it there. So you get the idea of how, their sterile inventory is laid out with the numbers that coordinates with your pick sheet. So your facility will hopefully have something like that. Like you said, hopefully your facility is as organized as that. The majority of the ones that I've been in have had some sort of inventory number system like that in place. So you'll become familiar with that as you work in your facility. And over time, you will get used to it. You may not even have to look at the numbers anymore. So that gives you a general idea of how, that department is laid out. Hopefully you noticed like how things were stored properly on the shelves. Like for example, those towels that he was picking are all on their side. They're not like stacked in a huge stack on top of each other where they might fall over. So they're stacked almost side to side, like organized that way horizontally. So make note of those types of things. That was an accurate way to store that item. Okay. So that is our Unit 7 and technically 8 conclusion. There will not be a live discussion next week because you just have to do that one reflection discussion post that, remember, is due by Tuesday. Okay. Not Wednesday like normal, Tuesday. Okay. So, my little head is in the way again. So I like this little quote here by Nelson Mandela. It says, it always seems impossible until it's done. So, maybe this particular quarter was a struggle for you, but you've made it, and now you can take the next step in your education, whether you plan on pursuing surgical technology or you want to go right out into the field, whatever it is. So, I applaud you for your hard work. You guys really did a good job, especially with those discussion boards. Hopefully those were helpful to you. I know sometimes it seems like a lot of work every week to do all those assignments, but you guys powered through. You did a great job. So if you guys have any questions, again, always feel free to reach out to me. Even after you move on from this class, if you still have a question, still feel free to email me. I'll do whatever I can to help you guys out, okay? So good luck on your next step in your education and whatever you choose to do. Have a great day.